Hey fellow Smallville fans, Bizarro Pat here. As most of you can probably tell from my music videos, I'm a huge Smallville fan. I was thinking of possibly starting to do reviews on movies, TV shows, and thought that Smallville would be a good place to start. So here's my review for Smallville Season 1. The storyline of Smallville is pretty much that this is Superman before he becomes Superman. It's Clark Kent as a teenager, living in small Kansas town, developing his powers and learning to become the man he'll eventually be. And we really get to see a lot of that throughout the course of the series, but Season 1 is the start, so Clark is very, very early on in his journey. He's young and impulsive. He needs a lot of guidance from his family and friends. He makes mistakes just like any teenager would. And he's only got a handful of the powers he'll eventually have, and sorry guys, flight isn't one of them. He does start off the series, however, with super strength, super speed, and very early on develops X-ray vision, and it's these three powers that he mainly uses throughout Season 1. The series focuses just as much on Clark as it does his future nemesis, Lex Luthor. Clark and Lex first meet after Clark rescues him from this car accident, and it's from then that they become best friends, but as we all know, Superman and Lex Luthor are destined to be arch enemies, rivals. So we really get to just see them as friends, but there's always this little undertone of Lex having these suspicions about Clark that are driving a wedge in their friendship completely. And we kind of get little hints of Lex's darker side underneath his charming, friendly, billionaire facade. The other main characters of the series are people like Lana Lang, Clark's love interest, and the girl he's loved for like years, Chloe Sullivan and Pete Ross, his best friends at school, Jonathan and Martha Kent, his family raised him and teach him his morals and really implant the beliefs that he'll have in the future as Superman. And Lionel Luthor, Lex's father, who was responsible for sending Lex to Smallville in the first place to prove his son's mettle as a business tycoon. Now that I gave you a really, really brief outline on the series, I'll just start talking about my highlights of the season. I love Smallville. I'm a huge, huge fan of the series, and Smallville Season 1 is partially responsible for that. I'll just start off with the acting is pretty great. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously, and you can tell some of the actors were really young at this time, still haven't really gotten fully into the acting their roles. But overall, they're very, very good. Especially Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor, who proves to be one of the best actors on the entire series throughout all of its seasons. Michael plays Lex as this man who he has a drive to be like Clark, but the way he was raised kind of makes him feel like he can do things that most people wouldn't. He feels very paranoid at times, curious. There's this curiosity and obsession with things that really is what splits him and Clark apart over time, but here we only get to see the beginnings of that with him slowly investigating Clark. We really get to see he doesn't want to. He does not want to investigate Clark, but he just feels this need to, even though he's his best friend. And that's one of the key things about Lex in this series that I think Michael really hammered down very well. And he just plays Lex as he's not fully evil yet, but there's some undercurrent underneath it all that you can see is there, it just hasn't come to the surface yet, which I think was great. Tom Welling plays a really good Clark Kent. He's not, as I said before, he's not fully Superman yet, so he's very kind of sensitive teenager who struggles with women and homework and fighting meteor freaks every other day. Tom plays Clark as just he's unsure of what he wants to be. He's unsure of what path he wants to take and what he wants to do with all these powers he's grown up with. He only just discovers in the first episode of this series that he's an alien, and he's been living on Earth for like 16 years, so, I mean, what kind of impact would that have on someone when you know that, when you realize you're even more of an outcast than you thought you were? Kristen Kriuk does a decent job as Lana Lang. Lana's probably one of my least favorite characters on Smallville, but that didn't really start up until the later seasons. Right now, she's just the girl next door, the nice girl who, even though she's popular, like one of the most popular girls in the school, she befriends Clark, and she really likes him, but she's dating this jock named Whitney Fordman, who, stereotypical jock, football jock. Allison Mack does a great job as Chloe Sullivan, who is an original character to Smallville. She was never in the Superman comics, but she's grown into this very popular character who almost every Superman fan knows, just because of how great of a job she did on Smallville. She's kind of a Lois Lane type character in these early seasons where she's working at the Smallville newspaper, The Torch, and she investigates stories of the weird things that happen in Smallville, and she's just she gets in over her head where she just kind of, her reporter instincts kick in when they really shouldn't. She does a great job as Chloe. I thought she was a very believable character. Sam Jones III as Pete Ross, he's pretty good. Pete doesn't have a lot to go with and at all throughout the series, really. He's one of those just characters that sets up things, but he doesn't really have much character development. Still was a nice character, though, as a good friend to Clark. Annette O'Toole and John Schneider as the Kents are both really great in their roles. They made them a bit younger in the series to kind of make them more active in Clark's life, because in the comics they're older than they are here. But they both do a really great job. And John Glover as Lionel Luthor is fantastic. I'd say him and Michael Rosenbaum are tied for the best actors this season. John Glover is only in a guest star capacity in this season, but throughout the series he becomes a series regular and gets more of a role, but here, every time he shows up, you know something big's about to go down with Lex. There were some really great episodes in the season that I really enjoyed, like the pilot of the series, the first episode. Really great way to set up the series as a whole. I mean, we really they introduced the characters really well. You know who Clark and Lex are. You can see where they might go with this. You can see the beginning of the journey that Clark will have as Superman, and you can see that this teenage kid from Smallville could eventually become Superman in the future. Other episodes that I really enjoyed are Leech, which was guest starred Shawn Ashmore, who played Iceman in the X-Men series, as this teenage boy there's an accident with this lightning storm and he gets Clark's powers. He takes Clark's powers from him. The reason I really enjoy this episode is I like how Shawn Ashmore's character, you see that not everyone can handle having Clark's powers, like, emotionally. Like, he uses his powers for fame, but then he realizes that not everyone's gonna look at him differently, and that's exactly what Clark was always worried about. So you see Clark's fears kind of come to fruition with this kid getting his powers. And another great thing about this episode is this is the first time over the numerous times throughout the rest of the series that we see Clark without his powers. We see that he enjoys it more than having powers. He's able to play basketball with his friends. He realizes what it's like to actually get tired from what everyone else does. He doesn't have to pretend anymore. He can be the young kid he wants to be. I also really enjoyed the season finale, Tempest, which I thought was a great first finale with the little subplot they had throughout the whole season with Lex investigating Clark. You see that come to a head, and you get to see tornadoes strike Smallville, which of course had to happen because what's a Kansas series without tornadoes, right? It left us on some good cliffhangers, and I thought it was a good season finale that led into season 2 very well. As much as I love this season, I love Smallville, this season did have some faults. I like the meteor freaks. I think the people who get infected by meteor rocks and get powers just about every episode to fight Clark, it's became kind of a tired formula after time, but there's some really good episodes with the meteor freaks. I mean, they're just good entertainment, and it was too early to have Clark battle someone like Brainiac or Doomsday, so I'm glad they kind of were able to make the meteor rocks be an enemy to Clark, not just by themselves, but through other people as well. Kryptonite's always been Clark's biggest weakness, so I thought that was really interesting. However, that's the thing, there were so many meteor freaks in season 1, almost every episode just about, only a few that didn't have them, that it just became kind of freak of the week, where these teenagers would get powers, and they'd use them to do either greedy things or do things out of desperation, and Clark would have to stop them, killed in the process of the fight. Clark wouldn't... I don't remember Clark ever intentionally killing any of them, but a few of them did die over the course of the fight. It's not a big problem, it's just the fact that it gets tiring after a while, but I'm glad that kind of subsides a little bit as the series rolls on and there's less and less meteor freaks as the plot thickens even more throughout the rest of the series, but the plot of this season is mainly Clark fighting meteor freaks with a little subplot of Lex investigating him. That's the plot of this season, which I think was a little too simple, and they could have probably made it a bit more complex than it was, but since it's the start of the series, I can't really bash them too hard for it. They're still trying to find their groove about what they want to do with the series. Overall, Smallville Season 1 was a great start to the series. It introduced the characters really well. You really got a feel for what the show was going to be about. You got to really realize who Lex and Clark are and who they will become eventually. You can see the beginnings of that. You get to see Clark realize he's faster than a speeding bullet. You get to see him look through his first wall with X-ray vision. Just some really great stuff in this season that I thought contributed well to the series as a whole. So for that, I'll give Smallville Season 1 8.5 out of 10.